Welcome to Dusky Lore. Close your eyes, dim the lights, and listen closely as the shadows begin to speak. Story 1. When you work the night shift at a convenience store, you expect everything to be pretty normal. Maybe a handful of customers, someone trying to buy beer after hours, and every now and then some loud group coming back from the strip. That was exactly what I imagined when I clocked in for my shift at the little corner store in Las Vegas. While most people were already ending their night, mine was just beginning. Honestly, I liked the quiet. The night shift has its own rhythm, restocking the shelves, sweeping the floor, and waiting for that occasional customer who shows up every once in a while. I always kept the radio on low volume to keep me company, a familiar sound that kept the silence from feeling too heavy. Around 1 a.m., I was at the register flipping through a magazine when I saw them. 2 men standing under the light post just outside the store, their shadows stretching across the pavement. At first, they were not doing anything, just standing there talking quietly. I told myself it was nothing unusual. People hang around all the time, waiting for a ride or just killing time. But there was something about the way they kept looking toward the store that set off a small alarm in my head. After a few minutes, one of them pointed in my direction. I looked away immediately, pretending I was focused on the magazine, but I could already feel my pulse starting to race. When I looked back, they were gone. Or so I thought. Less than 2 minutes later, the bell above the door rang and both men walked in. They moved slowly, scanning the store as if they were evaluating the place. One was tall and thin, wearing a baseball cap pulled down so low it almost covered his face. The other was shorter, heavy-set, and wearing a hoodie that hid most of his features. "Good evening," I said, trying to sound friendly. They did not answer. Instead, they split up and each started walking down different aisles. The taller one pretended to look at the snacks, while the shorter one headed toward the drink cooler. I stayed behind the counter, watching them closely. There was something about their movements that felt too deliberate, as if they had not come there to buy anything. The shorter guy was the first to come up to the register. He slammed a can of soda onto the counter and leaned toward me. "Quiet night, huh?" he said. "Yeah," I replied as I rang up the soda. "Pretty quiet." "Are you here alone?" he asked, his eyes moving back and forth across the store. The question shook me. It caught me completely off guard. "My coworkers are in the back," I lied, gesturing toward the stockroom door. He raised an eyebrow but did not push it. Instead, he looked over his shoulder at his friend who was already lingering near the exit. "Can I use the bathroom?" he asked. "Sorry, it is for employees only." He did not like that. His expression hardened, and for a moment I thought he was going to argue, but in the end he just gave a crooked smile and stepped back to join his friend near the door. As I watched them whispering to each other, my uneasiness kept growing. Something was wrong. I slipped my hand under the counter and pressed the silent alarm button, a precaution we had been taught to use if anything seemed suspicious. Suddenly, the taller one walked back toward me with his hands in his pockets. "Hey, do you sell phone chargers?" he asked. "They are next to the register," I answered, pointing to a small display. When he leaned down to look, I noticed that his other hand came out of his pocket holding a padlock. Before I could react, he walked to the door, looped a small chain through the handles, and snapped the padlock shut with a loud metallic click. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Relax," he said with a smile. "We just want to talk." At that moment, my heart was pounding. They had locked me inside. The shorter man moved toward the counter, blocking my way to the stockroom. "Look," I said, "if you are not going to buy anything, you need to leave." "We are not leaving," the tall one answered, his smile widening. "Not until we are done." I did not wait to find out what exactly he meant by done. While they were distracted, I reached under the counter and hit the panic button, the one that sent a direct signal to the police. The sound was deafening, vibrating through the walls. Both men froze. "What the hell?" the shorter one shouted. I did not give them time to react. I pulled the pepper spray out from under the counter and aimed it at the taller man. "Open the door," I ordered. He stood still for a second, but when I stepped toward him with the spray raised, he quickly pulled out the key and unlocked the padlock. I bolted out, running toward the parking lot as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard the crash of breaking glass. Frustrated, they started smashing the windows, sending glass everywhere. I did not stop running until I reached the gas station down the street, where I desperately explained what had happened. The employee called the police, and within minutes, several patrol cars were speeding toward the store. By the time the officers arrived, the men were already gone, but they left plenty of evidence behind. The broken glass, the bolt cutters they had dropped, and even the small chain, the padlock, and the key they had used to lock the door. The police took my statement and assured me they would do everything possible to find those men. Even so, that lingering feeling of fear never went away. I quit the job not long after. No amount of money was worth feeling that vulnerable. I am grateful for the training that helped me stay calm and react quickly, but that experience left me with a hard lesson. You cannot always anticipate danger, even in the most routine situations. Story 2. Working as a nurse was exhausting, but I loved my profession. Helping people, even in the most stressful situations, made every long shift worth it. Still, by the end of each workday, I was usually completely drained. That night in July started like any other. I left the hospital late, exhausted but relieved that the shift was finally over. What happened next is something I will never forget. I clocked out shortly after midnight, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the parking lot. At that hour, the hospital was eerily quiet. Most of the lights were dimmed, and the hallways were empty except for a few night shift employees. The parking lot was not much better. It was poorly lit, with only a few scattered lamps casting long, warped shadows. My car was parked near the far end of the lot, a spot I always regretted choosing whenever I had to leave late. As soon as I stepped outside, the warm, sticky air hit me like a wall. Florida summers have a way of clinging to your skin. I walked quickly, the rhythmic jingle of the keys in my hand breaking the silence. About halfway to my car, I saw him. At first, he did not look out of the ordinary. A man in his mid-30s, wearing a baseball cap and a loose hoodie, standing near one of the light poles. He was pacing back and forth, and there was something strange about the way he moved. It was too erratic, as if he were mentally preparing himself to do something. I kept walking, but I picked up my pace as soon as my instincts kicked in. I looked around the parking lot, hoping to see someone else, anyone else, but it was just him and me. He noticed me. I could feel his eyes on me, tracking every step I took. When I reached my car, I tried to unlock the door as quickly as possible. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice sounding loud in the middle of the silence. I froze, my hand hovering over the door handle. "Hey, can you help me?" he said, stepping a little closer. "I'm trying to find Main Street. Do you know where it is?" He sounded friendly, but there was something forced in the way he spoke. I turned only slightly, keeping my distance. "Sorry, I'm not sure." "That's okay," he replied, taking another step toward me. "Maybe you could look it up on your phone." I shook my head. "Sorry, I can't help you." He moved closer and his body language changed. The friendliness disappeared, replaced by something much more threatening, more predatory. "Come on," he said, his voice now harder. "It'll only take a second." I took a step back, my heart pounding. "I said no," I repeated, this time louder. Then he stopped and stared directly into my eyes with an intensity that made me deeply uncomfortable. "Why are you acting like this?" he asked, his tone almost mocking. That was when I noticed his hand sliding into the pocket of his hoodie. I did not wait to see what he was going to pull out. I tightened my grip on my keys, placing them between my fingers like an improvised weapon, and moved sideways toward the back of the car. "I don't want any trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. "You don't have to make this difficult," he replied, moving forward again. I looked desperately around the parking lot, searching for a way out. My car was my best option, but he was too close. Then I remembered the panic button on my key fob. Without thinking, I pressed it. The car alarm started blaring, echoing across the empty parking lot. The man flinched, thrown off by the sudden noise. I used that moment to run around the car and open the driver's side door. The moment I slid inside, he lunged toward me and struck the window with his hand. "Turn that off." I did not hesitate. I started the engine, put the car in gear, and slammed on the gas. For one terrifying moment, I thought he was going to chase after me. But he stayed there, standing still and watching me as I sped out of the parking lot. When I turned onto the main road, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was gone, but my hands were shaking, and my mind was racing with everything that could have happened if I had not reacted quickly. I stopped at a gas station a few miles away and called the police. The dispatcher asked me to describe the man and explain what had happened. "We're going to send an officer to the hospital parking lot to check the area," she said. "Are you safe now?" "Yes," I replied, even though I was not fully convinced myself. The police never found him. They said he was probably an opportunistic predator, some random person looking for the right moment. But that did not make me feel any better. The thought that he was still out there haunted me for weeks. Walking to my car became a routine filled with tension. My eyes constantly scanned the darkness, and I clenched my keys in my hand as if they were protection. That night changed me. I used to think I was careful, that I was always aware of what was happening around me. Now I know how quickly everything can go wrong. If there is one thing I learned from that experience, it is this: if something does not feel right, do not hesitate to act. That decision could save your life. Story 3. I have worked as a night security guard for nearly a decade, and I like to think I am good at what I do. Most nights, nothing out of the ordinary happens. A few rounds around the property, paperwork, and hopefully scaring off some stray raccoon digging through the trash. I had always felt confident in my ability to handle any situation that came my way. But one night last month, that confidence was shaken in a way I will never forget. The construction site I had been assigned to was huge, a massive expanse filled with steel beams, heavy machinery, and half-finished buildings. It was a cold night for Jacksonville, one of those nights when your breath becomes visible as you walk. The place was silent as usual, and the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness as I crossed the equipment yard to make sure everything was where it should be. I like to keep a steady pace, moving from one checkpoint to the next. I was already halfway through my shift when I noticed something strange. A section of the chain link fence at the back of the yard was slightly bent, as if someone had tried to force their way through. I walked over to inspect it. The damage was not major, but it was recent. If it had been there earlier, I would have noticed it during my previous rounds. A chill ran down the back of my neck, although I tried to brush it off. Probably just some kids messing around, I told myself. Even so, I made a mental note to report it to my supervisor and continued with my patrol. About an hour later, I passed through the machinery yard again, and that was when I saw him. A figure barely lit by the beam of my flashlight, standing next to one of the excavators. "Hey," I shouted in a firm voice. "This is private property. You are not supposed to be here." The figure did not move. I took another step and aimed the flashlight directly at him, but the moment the light hit him, he bolted behind the excavator and disappeared into the shadows. "Stop right there," I yelled. My heart was pounding as I ran toward that spot, but when I turned the corner, there was no one there. However, on the ground near the base of the machine, I found something that turned my stomach. A pair of bolt cutters and a knife. The bolt cutters, all things considered, could have seemed normal, but the knife was something else. Its blade glinted under the flashlight, and it did not look like just any work tool. It looked threatening. I reported the incident over the radio to my supervisor, and he told me to stay alert and call the police if the intruder came back. So I put the tools in the equipment shed before continuing my rounds. The rest of the night passed without incident, but that disturbing feeling of being watched never left me. After all, I never saw the man leave the construction site. Every creak of metal made me turn sharply, expecting to find someone standing there. The next night, I returned to the site more alert than usual. When I passed by the same place where I had seen the figure, I examined the shadows carefully, letting the flashlight linger on every corner. Then I saw something new. Footprints in the dirt leading from the fence toward the unfinished building at the far end of the property. I followed them cautiously, one hand resting on the pepper spray attached to my belt. The footprints led toward the entrance of the building, but when I got there, I found no one. It must have been around 3 o'clock in the morning when I saw the figure again. This time he was standing next to the main office on the site, a mobile trailer. I did not hesitate. I gripped the flashlight tightly and moved toward the trailer while shouting, "I can see you. Come out now." There was no response. When I got there, I pushed the door and opened it, only to find that it was empty. The air inside felt stale, and the faint smell of cigarette smoke was unmistakable. Someone had been there very recently. I stepped back outside and scanned the area, looking for any sign of movement, but there was no trace of the intruder. Over the next few nights, the situation only got worse. Tools started disappearing, and I found more signs that someone had been sneaking onto the property. Discarded food wrappers, cigarette butts, and even an improvised bedroll hidden behind a stack of wooden pallets. But that was not the most disturbing part. The worst part was the constant feeling that I was being watched. Every time I passed near the machinery yard, I felt eyes on me. It was as if the intruder was not just trying to steal. It was as if he was watching me, studying my routine. On the 5th night, I decided to set a trap for him. I placed a motion sensor near the equipment yard and positioned myself where I could watch without being seen. It was already past midnight when the sensor went off. Its sharp beep echoed through the silence. I grabbed my flashlight and moved quickly but quietly toward the yard. There he was, the same figure crouched beside one of the excavators. This time I did not shout at him. I moved in silently with my flashlight turned off until I was only a few feet away. "I've got you," I said, switching on the light. The figure spun around. His face was hidden beneath the shadow of his hood. For a moment, we just stared at each other, and I saw something in his eyes that chilled me to the bone. Pure evil. Before I could react, he took off running and disappeared into the darkness. I called the police immediately, and they arrived within minutes. We searched the entire area, but found no trace of the intruder. The only thing he left behind was a small rusty key, which the officers collected and kept as evidence. After that, my supervisor increased the security measures. They installed cameras and hired another guard for the night shift. I still work as a security guard, and some nights, when I am alone at my current post, I catch myself scanning the shadows. One thing I know for sure, I will never underestimate the dangers of the night shift again. Story 4. Living and working as a farmhand in Des Moines is more or less about as simple as life can be. It is hard work, yes, but there is something comforting about the routine, the early mornings, and the quiet nights under a blanket of stars. I had been working on the same farm for 3 years, and I thought I knew its rhythms like the back of my hand. At least that is what I thought before September of last year. What happened that day made me question everything I thought I knew about this place. The sun had just set, and the air still carried the unmistakable scent of freshly harvested corn. My boss had asked me to stay late to check the irrigation system in the farthest field. The walk was not long, but under the cover of darkness. The cornfield took on a completely different character. The tall stalks swayed in the breeze, and their dry leaves made an unsettling rustling sound that filled the background of an otherwise motionless night. As I walked down the dirt path with a flashlight in my hand, something caught my attention. A shadow right at the edge of the beam of light moved between the rows of corn. At first I thought it might be a horse that had gotten loose from the barn and ended up in the middle of the field. But it did not move like a horse. It moved too upright. I stopped and turned the flashlight to try to get a better look. It is probably nothing, just the light playing tricks on me, I told myself. More to calm myself than anything else. But when I got ready to keep walking, I heard it. A faint sound, as if someone or something was matching my pace. The noise followed me the entire way to the irrigation pump. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was probably animals or maybe the wind. But the uneasiness kept growing. After I finished checking everything, I decided to take a closer look. I stepped off the path and went into the field. The flashlight cast unsettling shadows all around me as I pushed my way through the stalks. The sound of my boots crunching on the dry soil mixed with the constant brushing of the leaves. And for a moment, I felt like the cornfield was swallowing me. "Hello?" I called out, and my voice sounded smaller than I expected. "Is anyone there?" There was no answer, only the wind and the constant whisper of the corn. I kept moving deeper in, sweeping the flashlight across the rows. And then I saw it, something tall and dark moving between the stalks, just beyond the reach of the light. My breath caught, and I stopped cold. Whatever it was not an animal. It was too tall, too human. I backed out of the field with the flashlight shaking in my hand, and by the time I made it back to the main path, the rustling had stopped. The cornfield had gone silent again, but it was a strange silence, thick and heavy. I did not stay to find out more. I went back to the barn as fast as I could, shut everything down for the night, and went home. The next night I convinced myself it had been nothing, just a long day and my imagination running wild. That was all. But when my boss asked me once again to check the far field, I found myself hesitating. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my hesitation. "Yeah, I'm just tired." Armed with my flashlight and a little more determination, I headed out again. The night was disturbingly similar to the one before. The same swaying stalks, the same suffocating silence. But this time I was not alone for long. As I walked down the path, I felt that annoying sensation of being watched again. I stopped and turned, sweeping the flashlight beam across the field. And then I saw it. The same shadowy figure, completely motionless, about 20 feet away, just beyond the first row of corn. "Hey," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I actually felt. "You're trespassing on private property." The figure did not move. I took a step forward, keeping the flashlight fixed on the spot where it stood. But the second the beam touched it, it vanished, melting into the shadows as if it had never been there. The sightings continued over the following nights, and each one was more unsettling than the last. The figure always appeared in the same general area. It never made a sound. It never came any closer. It felt like a game, one I was not sure I wanted to be part of. By the fourth night, I had had enough. I decided to investigate during the day, thinking maybe I would find footprints or some other explanation for what I had been seeing. In the sunlight, the field looked peaceful, with the corn tall and harmless. But when I got near the area where I had seen the figure, I noticed something strange. The stalks in that section were flattened, as if someone, or something, had been standing there for a long time. I crouched down to inspect the ground and found footprints. They were human, but larger than any I had ever seen before. The footprints led deeper into the field, disappearing between the rows of corn. That night, when my boss called to ask me to stay late again, I could not say no. As I walked toward the field, I gripped the flashlight tightly and scanned every shadow. When the figure appeared this time, it was closer. Too close. It was standing only 10 feet away, its silhouette barely visible in the darkness. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "What do you want?" The figure did not answer. Instead, without making a single sound, it turned and walked deeper into the cornfield. The stalks parted and swayed as it passed. The next day, I told my boss about the sightings, but he did not seem concerned. "It is probably just some drifter," he said with a shrug. "They pass through here all the time." But I knew it was not just some drifter. Whatever I had seen was not normal. I have not worked on that farm since last fall, but every time I drive past a cornfield, I catch myself looking between the rows, expecting to see that shadow again. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and share this video with your friends who love a good scare. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you can be among the first to see our next terrifying upload. Do you have your own night shift horror story? Leave it in the comments. We would love to feature it. Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes it is not the darkness you should fear, but what is hiding inside it. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next nightmare right here.